Everyone came to see a millionaire sell his wild horse, but no one expected a poor boy's quiet act to stop the whole auction cold. They called it the richest auction in Montana, until a thin boy stepped through the crowd and placed his hand on a wild horse no one dared touch. The cameras froze. The crowd fell silent. And in that breathless moment, something broke open. Not the horse, not the boy, but every heart watching. The morning mist lay over the valley like breath on glass. Thin, uncertain, waiting for the sun to decide if it should stay. From the ridge above, the Barrett Ranch stretched wide, gold grass trembling under a pale sky. A white tent flapped gently near the paddocks, where the annual horse auction was about to begin. Beneath it stood Eli Barrett, a man who had once made billions designing machines that learned faster than people. Now he owned land instead of patents, and silence instead of conversation. He adjusted the cuff of his wool coat, eyes fixed on the black stallion inside the round pen. The horse, Ash, was the last one on the list. The one no one wanted to ride, the one that had already broken 2 trainers and cost him a small fortune in medical bills. "If it can't be ridden, it can be sold," Eli muttered, the sentence tasting like iron in his mouth. Around him, the crowd stirred. Buyers, ranchers, tourists, and a few curious locals. Their breath mixed with the morning fog. Phones lifted. Cameras clicked. But all that noise blurred into background hum for Noah Reed, a thin 13-year-old boy carrying paper cups of coffee on a plastic tray. He moved through the crowd, careful not to spill, glancing once, just once, toward the pen. Ash stood perfectly still, except for the tremor along his flank. The air around him seemed charged, as if the horse were holding lightning under his skin. When he threw his head, the sunlight caught the healed scar that ran along his shoulder, a crooked reminder of some violence long past. Noah froze. The tray in his hands tilted, hot coffee spilling down his wrist, but he didn't flinch. The boy's gray-green eyes locked with the horse's dark, bottomless gaze. It wasn't anger he saw there. It was exhaustion, the kind that comes after too many years of running from people who never listened. "Kid, you okay?" a ranch hand barked, snatching the empty cups from him. Noah blinked and nodded, but his attention stayed with the animal inside the pen. Something about the horse's stillness felt too familiar. He knew that look, the wary patience of something trapped. Eli raised his hand to signal the start of bidding, but Ash exploded before the auctioneer could speak. The stallion reared, striking the wooden rails so hard the sound cracked through the valley. Dust swirled up in a pale halo. People gasped, stepped back, murmured about danger and waste. Eli's jaw tightened. He motioned for his men to pull the horse away, to end this embarrassment before it made headlines. When the tent emptied, only wind remained, brushing against the flapping banners like a whisper no one understood. Noah lingered long after his mother called from the kitchen tent. He couldn't leave. The horse was still there, locked in the smaller corral now, pacing in tight, frantic circles. Each turn seemed to dig a deeper trench in the dirt. From the house porch above, Eli poured a finger of whiskey into his coffee. He watched the boy standing by the fence and felt the strange tug of déjà vu. Years ago, another boy had stood like that, his own son, Tyler, before a horse that refused him. Back then, Eli had laughed, told him not every creature could be fixed with kindness. A month later, That same horse had thrown Tyler during a charity event. The memory came like cold rain, then vanished as Eli forced his mind shut. Below, Noah finally moved. He set the empty tray down, reached into his hoodie pocket, and pulled out a slice of apple he'd saved from breakfast. He broke it in half and tossed one piece over the fence. It landed near Ash's hooves. The horse stopped pacing, ears flicking forward. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Ash lowered his head, sniffed the air, and took the piece gently between his teeth. Noah smiled. Small, secret, like the kind you give a stranger who unknowingly shares your secret grief. Behind the window of his office, Eli Barrett saw it all. The camera feed from the corral streamed silently to the wall screen. A skinny boy, a wild horse, a gesture so simple it unsettled him more than any rebellion ever could. He muted the sound of his phone buzzing with messages about investment meetings and marketing campaigns. Instead, he turned up the volume of the live feed, though there was nothing to hear. Just the wind, the rustle of hay, and the faint sound of a child whispering to a creature too broken to trust. For the first time in years, Eli didn't know what to do next. The mist began to lift. Somewhere in that pale morning light, the boy and the horse stood facing each other, two quiet silhouettes against the awakening land. And though no one watching realized it yet, something irreversible had just begun. That night, the valley slept under a silver sky, but the ranch did not. The wind scraped softly at the tin roof, and the smell of hay mingled with the cold. Inside the workers' quarters, Noah lay awake, listening. Every few seconds, a dull thud echoed from the stables, a hoof striking wood, sharp and lonely. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake his mother, and pulled on his worn sneakers. The moonlight through the hallway window made the air look like milk. Outside, frost had begun to bloom over the fence rails. Noah crossed the yard, his breath visible, curling upward like smoke. The stables loomed ahead, long and dark, the single bulb above the door flickering weakly. He pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, a tired sound that seemed too loud in the stillness. Inside, he saw Ash pacing. The horse's coat shimmered with sweat despite the cold, and his breathing came in short bursts. Noah stayed at the threshold, holding his breath. The stallion turned sharply, nostrils flaring, eyes catching the light like twin mirrors. "Hey," the boy whispered, voice steady but small. "It's just me." Ash stamped once, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Noah waited. His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't move closer. He remembered something his mother had told him once while they were patching a wounded dog hit by a truck. Don't rush the fear. Let it tire itself out. Minutes passed. Long, heavy, breath-filled minutes. The horse's muscles rippled as he turned again, then stopped. The only sound was the wet, rhythmic exhale through his nostrils. Noah took one small step forward, holding up the dim lantern he had brought. The light caught the outline of the scar along Ash's shoulder, puckered and rough like a river map. He felt the instinct to reach out, but he resisted. Instead, he lowered the lantern and sat down just outside the stall door, back against the cold wood. "You're not angry," he murmured. "You're scared." Ash flicked his ears, but didn't retreat. Noah stayed there, silent, breathing in rhythm with the horse until their exhales seemed to sync. It was strange how easily the quiet filled him. At home, Silence usually meant something was wrong. His mother hiding bills, the landlord waiting at the door. But here it felt like understanding. In the shadows above the stables, a small red light blinked. The security camera. Still recording. And miles away, in the main house, Eli Barrett sat before a wall of monitors, the blue light from the screen painting his face pale. He'd been reviewing footage to verify safety protocols, but when he saw the feed from Ash's stall, his hand stilled on the mouse. The boy was there again. No trainer, no rope, no noise, just a child and the animal everyone had given up on. Eli leaned forward, watching Noah place the lantern aside and fold his legs. The boy was talking softly now. The audio picked up fragments. Sometimes, things break. Not forever. The horse tilted his head, breathing hard, but did not charge. Eli's brow furrowed. He'd seen hundreds of attempts to tame wild stock. He knew the posture of fear, the dance of dominance, but this was different. The boy wasn't demanding. He was listening. The video timestamp rolled past midnight. Still, neither of them moved. Then, something subtle shifted. Ash took a step closer. The sound of his hoof in straw was barely audible, but it startled Eli more than thunder. The horse's head lowered, his breath fogging the air between him and the boy. Noah whispered again. Just one word. Easy. It wasn't magic. It was smaller, simpler, like watching two lost languages find the same word. Ash snorted, the heat of it brushing Noah's sleeve. The boy smiled, tiny and uncertain. Slowly, deliberately, he reached his hand forward, stopping halfway. The horse stretched his neck, nostrils flaring, and for a suspended heartbeat touched his nose to Noah's fingers. Outside, a gust of wind slammed the stable door, breaking the moment. Ash jerked back, heart pounding, hooves scraping. Noah didn't chase. He just whispered, "It's okay," and waited for the air to settle again. By the time he slipped back to his room, dawn was hinting at the horizon, painting the snow fences faint gold. His mother stirred as he climbed into bed. "You up already?" she murmured, half asleep. "Couldn't sleep," he answered truthfully. Later that morning, while breakfast plates clattered in the workers' mess hall, Eli appeared unexpectedly. He scanned the room until his eyes found Noah. The boy froze, half a pancake suspended in midair. Eli's voice carried easily. "After you're done here, come to my office." Murmurs followed as Noah nodded, unsure what he'd done wrong. His mother's face paled. "What happened?" she whispered. Noah shook his head. "Nothing. I just talked." Hours later, standing in front of Eli's massive desk, Noah watched the man pour coffee into a glass instead of a mug. The office smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Eli didn't look up from the monitor as he spoke. "I saw you last night." Noah swallowed. "I wasn't hurting him." "I know," Eli said. His voice had softened, though it was still threaded with disbelief. "That horse hasn't let anyone near him in months, and you, some kitchen boy, sit there and he doesn't trample you." Noah shifted his weight, unsure if it was praise or accusation. "He just needs space." Eli finally looked up, eyes the color of ash after fire. "Space doesn't pay bills. That animal's worth more than this whole ranch." He took a long sip, then sighed. "You think you can do better than the men I hired?" Noah hesitated. "No, sir. I just think maybe he doesn't need to be broken." The line hung between them like mist that wouldn't clear. Eli set his glass down carefully. "You've got 1 week," he said at last. 1 week to prove he's not useless. If you can calm him enough to let me near, I'll pull him from the auction. If not, he's gone. Understand?" Noah nodded, his pulse a quiet drum. "Good," Eli said, dismissing him with a flick of his hand. "And keep your mother out of it. She worries too much." Outside the office, the cold hit Noah like a slap. But beneath the chill, something electric hummed through him. Not fear, not yet. It was the awareness that the next 7 days would decide more than the fate of a horse. That night, when he returned to the stables with his lantern, Ash was waiting by the door, ears tilted toward the sound of his footsteps. The boy smiled softly. "I guess you heard," he whispered. "A week. Let's see what we can do." Ash blinked, a slow acknowledgement, the faintest toss of his head. And though no one was watching this time, not even the man in the big house, Noah felt the same invisible connection spark again, as quiet and powerful as the breath they shared in the dark. The next morning came sharp and bright, the air thin enough to sting the lungs. Snow from the night before had left the fences glazed in white, and the fields glittered like powdered glass. Noah walked toward the corral with his hood up, one hand clutching a small notebook. Inside it were a few scribbled lines his mother used to read aloud. Phrases from books she said carried courage better than sermons. He wasn't sure why he brought it, only that the weight of it steadied him. Ash was already awake. The stallion stood near the gate, head lifted toward the horizon as if listening for something Noah couldn't hear. The boy unlatched the door slowly. "Morning," he said. His breath left a cloud that broke apart in the cold. Ash's ears twitched, but he didn't move away. This time Noah didn't bring a lantern or food. He just stepped inside, closed the gate behind him, and sat on the hay by the wall. The boards pressed cold against his back. He began reading softly, not to fill the air, but to shape it. "You tame by waiting, not by winning," he murmured. The horse's tail flicked once. Eli watched from a distance, his silhouette sharp against the bright snow. He didn't approach. He had told himself it was curiosity, not belief, that kept him watching. From the porch, he could see the boy's breath rise and fade, see the animal's flank move like tide water. No shouting, no rope, just two shapes in the stillness. Hours passed. Noah's mother came once, leaving a thermos on the fence without speaking. When she saw the boy motionless and the horse unstartled, something in her chest loosened. Fear, maybe, or the kind of relief that never makes a sound. By noon, the ranch was alive with the usual noise: tractors, laughter, the metallic ring of tools. But inside the pen, it was as if time had slowed to a different rhythm. Ash lowered his head, pawed the ground once, then walked a slow circle that brought him nearer to the boy. Noah didn't reach for him. He only turned a page and kept reading. "You don't have to carry the fear someone else left behind," he said. Ash snorted, almost a sigh, and came close enough that Noah could feel the warm pulse of his breath on his arm. It lasted 3 seconds, long enough for trust to flicker like the first light under ice. That afternoon, Eli came down from the porch. His boots left deep marks in the snow as he crossed to the corral. "How long are you going to sit there?" he asked. "Until he decides it's enough," Noah said without looking up. Eli folded his arms. "You think patience is some kind of miracle? That animal was bred for power, not poetry." Noah met his gaze calmly. "Maybe power's just something that forgot what poetry feels like." For a second, Eli almost smiled. Then he turned away, muttering about wasted hours. But as he walked back toward the main house, the memory of that single line followed him, echoing in the space his son's voice used to fill. The week wore on. Each day brought its own small victory. Ash standing still when the door creaked, allowing a hand to rest briefly on his neck, not flinching when Noah walked behind him. And with every small gesture, the boy grew quieter, as if learning the language of the unsaid. By the 6th day, he no longer needed the notebook. He'd memorized the rhythm of Ash's breathing, the subtle shift that meant fear, the slower exhale that meant peace. When Eli came down that evening, the light was fading to copper. "Tomorrow's the 7th day," he said. "My buyers are asking questions. You ready to show them something worth keeping?" Noah brushed straw from his sleeves. "I'm not here to show. I'm here to prove he's not broken." Eli studied him, unsure whether to be irritated or impressed. "You've got until noon," he said finally. "After that, the auction stands." When he left, the silence felt heavier. Snow started again, soft flakes drifting through the slats, landing on Ash's mane. Noah leaned against the post, whispering, "They think this is about you. It's not. It's about how people forget what gentle means." As the horse's ears flicked, he pressed closer, the tip of his muzzle brushing the boy's shoulder. It wasn't obedience. It was recognition. Later that night, in the main house, Eli sat by the window watching the stables through glass fogged with his own breath. He poured whiskey into coffee again, the way he always did when he needed the warmth without admitting weakness. Behind him, the television murmured about market trends and real estate growth, phrases like investment potential and mortgage refinance floating in the air. None of it held him. His eyes stayed fixed on the barn light glowing faintly in the dark. He remembered his son's last words before that accident. "I almost had him, Dad." He'd never told anyone what haunted him more. Almost, or had. The next morning broke clean and cruel. The air tasted like metal. From the ridge, you could see miles of frozen pasture. Workers gathered near the ring, their chatter clouding into visible bursts. The auction would resume tomorrow. Everyone knew this was the final test. Noah arrived first. His mother followed, wrapping a scarf around her neck, watching silently as her boy opened the corral gate. "You sure about this?" she asked. He nodded. "He's ready." She wanted to say more, but didn't. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small red apple, and pressed it into his hand. "Then give him this, just in case." Inside the pen, Ash pawed the dirt, tail flicking. Noah held out the apple, palm open. The stallion stepped forward, neck stretching. His teeth brushed the fruit, then took it whole. The sound of crunching echoed softly under the gray sky. At the fence, Eli exhaled, a line between disbelief and pride cutting across his features. "Tomorrow," he said quietly to no one in particular. "We'll see what patience is worth." As the boy and the horse stood side by side, the world around them seemed to slow. Even the wind had to stop to listen. The next day began without birdsong. The valley seemed to hold its breath, the light over Montana a washed-out gold. Inside the corral, frost still clung to the rails, melting where the warmth of Ash's breath touched them. Noah stood nearby, brushing dust from the stallion's coat. The routine had become its own kind of prayer. No rope, no shouting. Only the sound of a brush sliding through hair and the rhythm of two hearts learning each other. He was careful not to rush, careful with every motion. The brush revealed more than dirt. It mapped the story of what the horse had endured. Near the shoulder, beneath a swirl of coarse hair, he noticed something uneven. When the bristles snagged, Ash flinched. Noah knelt, moved the hair aside, and saw it clearly for the first time. A deep, faded scar, long as his hand and twisted like lightning frozen in flesh. He exhaled through his nose, softly. "That's why you don't want anyone on your back," he murmured. The horse's muscles quivered under his palm, but he didn't move away. Eli Barrett watched from the gate, silent. He had promised himself he would let the boy handle this final day, but the sight of that mark pulled him forward. "That scar," he said, his voice a rasp in the cold. "It came with him, from the breeders in Nevada. Some fool thought pain makes obedience." Noah looked up at him. "Does it?" Eli hesitated, then gave a half-smile that wasn't really a smile. "It makes silence, not obedience." He turned to leave, then added quietly, "I know the difference now." When he was gone, Noah stayed crouched beside Ash. He ran the brush again, lighter this time, until the stallion's skin twitched less under the touch. Above them, a hawk circled. The boy took it as a good sign. "You've got a story in that scar," he whispered. "But you're not it anymore." By afternoon, word spread that the boy had discovered something wrong with the horse. The stable hands whispered that Ash wasn't fit for show. Others said the scar made him unpredictable, dangerous. Noah heard them while washing the brushes by the trough. He didn't argue. He'd learned that silence travels further than shouting. But the words followed him into the night like small, biting insects. When he returned to the corral after dinner, he found Eli there again, standing in the dark. A single lamp hung over the pen, swinging slightly in the wind. "You believe in luck, Noah?" the man asked without turning. The boy shrugged. "Not really. I believe in trying." Eli nodded slowly. "My son used to say that." The admission hung in the cold air like mist. It was the first time Eli had mentioned his child. He thought every horse could be fixed if you just gave it a reason. Then one didn't. His eyes flicked toward Ash. "You'd think time heals things, but sometimes it just covers them up, like that coat over the scar." Noah didn't speak. He understood grief better than he should at 13. They stood there in silence, two figures bound by a loss neither had chosen. Later that night, Noah whispered to Ash, "Tomorrow's the auction. They'll expect you to perform." He stroked the horse's neck, fingers tracing the raised edge of the scar. "But you don't owe them that. You don't owe anyone proof." Ash shifted closer, the weight of his body pressing into Noah's shoulder like an answer. The boy smiled faintly, though his chest felt heavy. The next morning, the ranch came alive earlier than usual. Trucks rolled in, men in wool coats unloaded metal rails, and the auction banners fluttered like flags before a war. Snow crunched under boots. Eli's workers adjusted speakers, tested microphones. This wasn't just about selling a horse. It was about reputation, pride, money. Words like investment, luxury property, and premium genetics drifted among the crowd, the language of real estate and finance replacing the quiet of the land. Noah stood apart, hands in pockets, watching the preparations. The same men who laughed at him a week ago now looked at him differently, half curious, half amused. He didn't blame them. People always watch longer when they're waiting for failure. Eli approached, his coat flaring slightly in the wind. "You've done more with him than anyone else," he said. "But remember, this is business. Today, that horse needs to show he's worth keeping." Noah's stomach turned. "He's not something to keep," he said quietly. Eli frowned, not out of anger, but confusion. "You talk like he's human." Noah looked at Ash, who was now watching them both. "He acts more human than most people I know." The man said nothing. He only nodded once, the kind of gesture that ends a conversation not because it's over, but because there's nothing left to say. That evening, after the workers had gone and the valley sank into its pale blue twilight, Noah entered the pen for what he thought might be the last time. He carried no tools, only a soft wool blanket that smelled faintly of apples and hay. He draped it gently over Ash's back, covering the scar. The horse tensed, then relaxed. "I won't make you jump," Noah said, voice steady. "If they ask, we'll walk. Just walk. That's enough." The horse blinked, a slow acceptance. The boy pressed his forehead to the stallion's neck. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you'll be okay." Somewhere behind him, a floorboard creaked. Eli stood there again, hands in his pockets. "You talk to him like he understands," he said. Noah didn't turn around. "Maybe he does." Eli nodded once more, but this time, his voice carried a trace of surrender. "Then make sure the world sees that." Outside, the last of the light disappeared behind the hills. The corral lamp hummed and flickered, casting their shadows long and thin against the snow. Two outlines, boy and horse, merged for an instant, then parted again. That night, neither of them slept. The boy lay awake, replaying the whispers, the laughter, the weight of what awaited them. The horse shifted restlessly in his stall, sensing something inevitable in the air. When the dawn came, thin and gray like an old photograph, they were both already standing. The gate creaked. The first guests were arriving, and across the field, the auctioneer's voice was warming up, cheerful and sharp. Noah exhaled slowly, running his hand once more over the scar beneath the blanket. "Ready?" he whispered. Ash answered with a low, rolling breath. Not yes, not no. Something in between. The kind of sound you make when you're tired of being afraid. And when they stepped out into the light, side by side, the whole ranch seemed to turn and watch. By noon, the sky above the Barrett Ranch burned white, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer even in winter. Dust rose from the corral, carried by a nervous wind. Trucks lined the fence rows, gleaming like metal teeth, and strangers filled the bleachers built overnight. They wore cowboy hats, fur collars, and mirrored sunglasses that turned the valley into fragments of sky. Somewhere near the loudspeakers, a man tested the mic, his voice cracking through the air like thunder. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Barrett Annual Auction." Noah stood near the gate, clutching the rope that wasn't really a rope. It was just a length of cotton, soft and unthreatening. He hated the noise. Every shout, every camera click made Ash's muscles twitch beneath the wool blanket. The boy leaned close, whispering, "It's okay. Just walk with me." Eli Barrett strode toward the viewing stand, his posture commanding, his coat immaculate. On his wrist, his watch gleamed like a badge of certainty. To him, this was order, control, proof that everything had a price, even the wild. When his eyes found Noah and the horse, he nodded to the announcer. The auctioneer lifted his arm. "Up next," he said, "the prized black stallion from Nevada, Ash, trained under special supervision, Starting bid, 75,000. But before the first number echoed, the horse flinched. A camera flash burst too close, and Ash reared slightly, hooves scraping the dirt. The crowd gasped. Noah tightened his grip, not to restrain, but to ground him. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't let them see the fear." Ash snorted, lowering his head, his breath steaming in the sunlight. Eli stepped to the fence, speaking quietly to a handler. "Have him jump the bar," he ordered. "They need to see he's sound." Noah heard it, his chest tightening. "He's not ready for that," he called out, his voice breaking through the noise. Eli's gaze met his, cold as the Montana wind. "He has to be." The handlers began setting up the low wooden bar. The crowd stirred, sensing the tension, cameras raised. Noah walked alongside Ash to the center of the corral. He could feel the stallion's heartbeat through the rope, fast, uneven. The scar beneath the blanket pulsed like something alive. "You don't have to," he whispered, pressing his forehead against the horse's neck. "They don't get to decide." Eli's voice carried. "Now, boy." Noah didn't move. The crowd went quiet. Dust swirled like smoke. Then, in one clear motion, he dropped the rope. The soft end hit the ground with a sound that was somehow louder than the murmurs it silenced. Gasps rippled through the stands. Noah stepped in front of Ash, his small frame casting a narrow shadow over the horse's hooves. The announcer's voice faltered. "Son, move aside." But Noah spoke, his tone calm and steady. "If you make him jump, he'll break again. He's not afraid of work. He's afraid of memory." The wind shifted, carrying his words like a prayer. Eli took a step forward, anger flashing behind the composure. "That's enough," he said. "You're not in charge here." Noah looked up, eyes bright, voice low. "Then why did you let me try?" For a moment, even the sun seemed to freeze above them. The scene hung suspended, the boy's hand resting against the horse's jaw, the man frozen mid-stride, the crowd holding its breath. Then Ash moved. Not away, not wild, but toward the boy. The stallion bent his head, resting it gently against Noah's shoulder. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was awe. The kind that humbles a person into quiet. Someone in the crowd lowered his phone. Another whispered, "My God." Eli's throat worked, but no words came. The announcer, unsure what to do, simply let the mic fall back to his side. For a few seconds, the only sound was the rhythmic breathing of horse and boy. When Noah finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "You don't have to prove anything, Ash. You already did." The stallion exhaled sharply, nudging Noah's chest once, as if agreeing. Eli turned away, jaw tight, unable to look anyone in the eye. For the first time in years, the man who built empires from logic had nothing left to measure. He gave a small nod to the announcer. "End it," he said quietly. "We're done here." The crowd murmured, confused, disappointed, but they obeyed the shift in mood. One by one, they drifted toward their cars, leaving behind the sound of engines and footsteps over gravel. Noah stood still until the noise faded. Ash nudged his arm again, seeking reassurance. "We're okay," the boy murmured, though his voice trembled with relief. He could feel the sweat cooling on his neck, the adrenaline melting into exhaustion. At the fence, his mother waited, eyes red from tears she hadn't meant to shed. She opened her arms, but Noah only shook his head slightly. Not yet, he said. He's still scared. Behind them, Eli lingered. He stared at the empty bleachers, at the banners advertising wealth and prestige fluttering uselessly in the breeze. He realized, with a strange ache, that all his success, the mortgage investments, the digital marketing, the houses lined with smart home devices, had never bought him this kind of silence. As the last truck disappeared down the dirt road, the ranch fell quiet again. The sun hung low, reluctant to leave, as though it, too, didn't want to break the spell. Eli walked slowly toward the corral. "Noah," he said. The boy turned, wary. "You made the crowd cry," Eli continued. "And me think." The man paused at the gate. His next words came out rough. "I won't sell him." Noah blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "You mean—" Eli nodded. "He's yours to care for. You earned that much." The boy's throat closed around his thank you. He just nodded, stroking Ash's mane. Eli turned toward the house. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the richest man in the valley. He just felt human. When he looked back, the boy was standing beside the black stallion, the setting sun catching on the scar beneath the blanket, turning it to gold. And for one fleeting moment, Eli thought maybe redemption looked exactly like that, quiet, unexpected, and entirely undeserved. The wind carried the faint scent of hay and earth through the air. Somewhere, a bell rang from the chapel down the road, echoing across the hills like a benediction. The day felt endless, and as the last light melted into the horizon, the sun seemed to hesitate, just for them, as if it, too, had decided to stay a little longer. By the time the crowd's dust had settled and the last truck disappeared beyond the ridge, the ranch felt emptied of noise and purpose. The banners that once screamed, "Barrett Auction," "Elite Stock and Investment Opportunities," hung limp in the still air. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out, its cry folding into the echo of hooves long gone. Inside the main house, Eli Barrett stood by the tall window overlooking the empty corral. He could still see the image burned into his mind. The boy, the black stallion, the silence that silenced everyone. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered. He tugged at his collar, poured himself another glass of coffee, the kind with more whiskey than caffeine, and set it on the desk without drinking. A faint sound at the door broke his trance. Noah stood there, cap in hand, his cheeks pink from the cold. His mother waited a few steps behind him, unsure if they were welcome. "You wanted to see us, sir?" Noah asked. Eli nodded slowly. "Come in, both of you." The office smelled, faintly of leather and paper. Clara's gaze wandered to the photos on the wall. Eli and a teenage boy standing beside a bay horse, their faces sunlit, frozen in time. The photo was dusty, its glass cracked. She looked away, feeling as though she'd intruded on something sacred. Eli gestured toward the chairs but remained standing. "You made me cancel the biggest event of my year," he said, tone even. Noah's hands tightened on his cap. "But you also made every person there question what they came for." He walked toward the window again, his back to them. "I don't know what to call that. Loss or grace?" Clara spoke softly. "Maybe both." He turned then, meeting her eyes. "I told you he could work with the horse, not that he could undo something in me." Noah frowned slightly. "I wasn't trying to." "I know." Eli's mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. That's what makes it worse. He picked up his coffee and took a sip. The taste was bitter, grounding. The horse stays here. No sale. No show. He's under your care from now on. I'll pay you weekly, whatever the going rate is for animal caretakers. And your mother? She'll have full benefits at the ranch kitchen. Clara blinked, startled. That's generous. Eli shrugged, his voice quieter now. Generosity isn't something I've practiced much. Maybe it's time. Noah hesitated, then said, Thank you, Mr. Barrett. When they left the office, Clara whispered, Did you see his eyes? He looked like someone who's been forgiven. Noah nodded, but didn't reply. He was thinking of something else. The way the sunlight caught the scar under Ash's blanket, turning it gold like it belonged there. That evening, the ranch dipped into a pale blue hush. Snow had begun again, drifting in soft spirals across the empty stands. Noah went back to the corral, a bowl of oats in his hands. Ash waited, quiet, head lowered. The boy set the bowl down and brushed the stallion's neck. You did good today, he said. Better than any speech I could have given. Ash snorted softly, almost like laughter. From the porch behind them, Eli appeared, coat collar turned up. He doesn't even look wild anymore, he said. Noah smiled faintly. Maybe because no one's calling him that now. Eli leaned against the fence. You know, when I bought this ranch, I thought I was buying peace, land that doesn't talk back. Turns out silence doesn't mean peace. It just means nobody's listening. Noah looked up at him, then back at Ash. Sometimes silence listens better than words. For a moment, they simply stood there, the boy, the man, and the horse, all breathing in sync. Then a gust of wind pushed through, scattering snow like a handful of silver dust. Eli brushed his sleeve, noticing a small, wet spot near his wrist. Snow, he muttered, though he wasn't sure. The drop slid down, darkening the wool of his sweater. Could have been melted snow, could have been something else. He didn't check. The next morning, the news of the auction miracle had already spread online. A video clip, someone's shaky phone recording, had gone viral. The title read, Boy Stops Millionaire Auction with One Silent Act. Thousands of comments poured in, arguing whether it was bravery, luck, or divine intervention. Advertisements for life insurance quotes and financial planning services now filled the sidebar, irony layered over tragedy. Eli saw it all, but instead of irritation, he felt a quiet amusement. The world always tries to monetize what it doesn't understand. When Noah arrived that afternoon, he found the man sitting on the fence, laptop closed beside him. You're trending, Eli said dryly. Noah frowned. I didn't mean to. Most people don't, Eli replied. But maybe it's not a bad thing. Sometimes attention wakes people up. The boy looked at Ash, grazing peacefully a few yards away. He doesn't care about attention. He just wants quiet. Eli smiled, a real one this time. So do I. He paused, then added, There's a cabin by the stream. It's old, but still standing. I'll have it cleaned up for you and your mother. It'll give you space. And him, too. Noah's eyes widened. Really? Eli nodded. You'll need it if you're staying here. And I'd rather see that horse alive and free than paraded in front of people who clap for the wrong reasons. The snow thickened as they talked, covering the footprints they'd left in the dirt. When the first flakes landed on Ash's mane, the stallion lifted his head, ears pricking at the faint sound of river ice cracking in the distance. That night, from the window of their small room, Noah watched Eli walk back toward the main house. The man's figure seemed smaller now, softer against the white landscape. Clara stood behind her son, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You did something rare today," she whispered. "What's that?" "You made a man remember who he was before the world taught him to win." Outside, Ash gave a low, rolling snort, shaking snow from his coat. Noah smiled. "And he made me remember what trust sounds like." The sky turned darker, stars glinting faintly between clouds. For the first time in weeks, the boy slept without dreams. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the frozen fields, it caught a single droplet still clinging to the sleeve of Eli's wool sweater. Clear, perfect, suspended in light. Proof that even the smallest things can change shape before they fall. The wind that morning had softened. The white crust of snow covering the ranch began to melt, leaving the earth dark and damp beneath. Steam rose from the ground in thin ribbons, turning the valley into a dreamscape. Noah stood by the stable door, hand resting on the worn latch, listening to the steady breathing of Ash inside. The stallion was half asleep, his weight shifting lazily from one hoof to another, his breath fogging the air in small, rhythmic bursts. The boy looked over his shoulder. The cabin by the stream had been cleaned, just as Eli promised. Smoke already trailed from the chimney where his mother was heating breakfast. Everything was quiet, so gentle it almost felt undeserved. When he opened the stall door, Ash lifted his head, ears flicking toward the sound. "Morning," Noah said softly. "Today's the day." The words hung there, uncertain. For the past week, Noah had kept the stallion inside, giving him time to rest. Now Eli wanted the horse to stretch his legs, to walk freely in the pasture beyond the ridge. It wasn't a test, at least not officially, but everyone knew freedom can be its own kind of trial. Eli arrived a few minutes later, his boots sinking into the thawing ground. "You ready?" he asked. Noah nodded, brushing his hand across Ash's neck. "He is." Together they led the horse toward the outer gate. The metal hinges groaned with the effort of being moved after so long. Beyond it lay the open field, wide, wind-swept, endless. The fence line shimmered faintly with morning frost. Ash hesitated at the threshold, nostrils flaring as if he could smell distance itself. Noah didn't pull or coax. He just waited. Eli watched in silence, arms folded, the same way he'd once watched investors decide his future in boardrooms. The difference was that now he was waiting for something he couldn't control. After a moment, Ash stepped forward. His hooves sank into soft earth, and the sound of it, thud, 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 was almost musical. Noah walked beside him at first, then stopped when the stallion moved ahead on his own. The horse trotted a few yards, turned his head back as though checking that the boy was still there, then continued into the field. Eli exhaled, the breath visible in the cool air. "You think he'll come back?" Noah smiled faintly. "If he wants to." The man nodded slowly. "Freedom's a gamble, like investing in something you can't see the return on." The boy shrugged. "Not everything has to pay you back." That line struck Eli harder than it should have. He watched the horse move farther away, dark against the pale land. The sight stirred something that wasn't regret or pride, just a strange, clean ache. Hours passed like that, both of them standing near the fence, watching Ash circle the pasture. At one point, the horse broke into a gallop, mane streaming like ink across the light. The sound of his hooves rolled through the valley, deep and steady, echoing off the distant hills. It wasn't wildness. It was joy. Noah laughed quietly, the sound breaking the hush. Eli turned to look at him, surprised. "When's the last time you did that?" the boy asked. "What?" "Laughed without a reason." Eli blinked, then let out a small chuckle, rusty and uncertain. "Maybe never." "Then you're late," Noah said. The moment passed, simple and clean as sunlight through frost. Later that afternoon, Clara brought lunch down from the cabin, sandwiches and a thermos of soup. She set them on the fence post and looked at the two of them standing there. "He looks happier out there," she said, nodding toward Ash. "He's finally breathing his own air," Noah answered. Eli leaned against the fence, his expression unreadable. "I spent years chasing bigger pieces of land," he said quietly. "Buying space I didn't even have time to walk through. But that horse makes a single acre look like heaven." Clara smiled gently. "Some returns don't show up on paper." He met her eyes, then looked away, clearing his throat. "Speaking of paper," he said, half embarrassed, "I've been talking with my lawyers. There's a way to transfer part of this property to you two, maybe a small plot near the creek. I'd call it fair compensation." Noah stared at him. "You'd give us land?" Eli shrugged. "Think of it as a long-term investment in something real." Clara's voice softened. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. "That's why I will." The sun was beginning to dip when Noah finally opened the pasture gate again. Ash returned on his own, walking slowly, his coat glistening with sweat. He stopped beside the boy, lowering his head for a scratch behind the ear. Noah obliged, smiling. "He came back," Clara whispered. Eli gave a small laugh. "Seems he trusts you more than he trusts the world." Noah didn't answer. He was watching the way Ash's shadow stretched beside his own, blending in the orange light. As they led the horse back toward the stable, the wind picked up, scattering leaves across the dirt path. Eli reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small brass key. He held it out to the boy. "For the cabin's new door," he said. "It sticks sometimes. You'll have to push harder than you think." Noah took it carefully, the metal warm from the man's hand. "Thank you," he said. Eli nodded. "Just remember, doors are strange things. They keep things safe, but they also decide who gets to leave." The boy looked at the key, then at the horizon where the field stretched into miles of gold. "Maybe some doors are meant to stay open," he said. That night, long after the lights in the big house went out, Noah stepped outside the cabin. The moon reflected off the river, silver and endless. He walked to the corral gate, opening it just enough that the latch didn't click shut. Ash, half asleep in his stall, raised his head. "Whenever you're ready," Noah whispered. "You don't need permission." He stood there for a while, listening to the steady breathing of the land. Somewhere behind him, the cabin door creaked, and his mother's voice drifted out, warm and tired. "Come in before you freeze." "I'm coming," he called softly, eyes still on the open gate. He finally turned to go. A gust of wind swung the door wider, just a little. Enough that, by morning, no one could tell whether it had been opened by accident or design. The next morning dawned warmer, the kind of quiet that feels like an afterthought of winter. A pale sun hung over the ridge, and the frozen creek began to stir with the sound of melting ice. Noah woke to the smell of bread baking in the small cabin and the faint tapping of his mother's fingers against a mug. He lay still for a moment, listening to the wind, or rather, the lack of it. The air had gone still, the ranch wrapped in an unfamiliar calm. He stepped outside barefoot, letting the cold bite into his skin just enough to remind him he was awake. Down in the field, Ash stood near the open gate, mane lifted gently by a breeze too small to move the trees. The door had stayed ajar all night. The horse could have left, but hadn't. When Eli came by later with a folder under his arm, he found the boy sitting in the grass near the stallion, sketching shapes in the dirt with a twig. "You planning to build something there?" Eli asked, his tone lighter now. "Just thinking," Noah replied. He didn't leave. Eli smiled. Maybe he figured out where he belongs. He opened the folder and handed it over. "Deed papers. I spoke to my lawyer. The land by the creek. 10 acres. It's yours and your mother's now. Legally." Noah stared at the papers. "I thought you were joking." "I don't joke about contracts," Eli said with a wry grin. "Though I probably should have, more often. It might have made me easier to like." Noah didn't answer. He just nodded and looked out toward Ash. He still could leave if he wanted. "Then maybe you both finally have the same kind of freedom," Eli said quietly. They stood there for a while, the silence between them heavy but gentle. The man turned, tucking his hands into his coat pockets. "You'll need to sign those. Your mom, too. The lawyer will file them by the end of the week. I'll handle the fees, taxes, insurance, all of it." Noah blinked. "You don't have to keep giving things away." Eli looked at the boy, his expression caught somewhere between pride and fatigue. "I'm not giving anything away, kid. I'm just putting something back where it should have been all along." After he left, Noah walked the fence line, papers tucked under his arm. Ash followed him like a shadow, occasionally bumping his shoulder against the boy's back. When they reached the far end of the pasture, Noah crouched, pulling a handful of snow and watching it melt in his palm. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked quietly. The horse flicked his ears, lowering his head as if to listen. "Maybe this isn't the end," Noah continued. "Maybe it's the start of something bigger, something we just don't see yet." He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. The air felt heavier than it had that morning. The stillness was no longer calm. It was expectant. From the direction of the big house came the faint rumble of an engine starting. Eli had driven into town earlier to meet his attorney. The roads were slick from thawing snow, the mountain curves unpredictable. Clara had offered to go instead, but he'd waved her off. "I'll be fine," he'd said. "I know these roads better than I know myself." Hours later, when the sun began to dip, Clara stood by the cabin window watching the horizon. "He should have been back by now," she murmured. Noah looked up from the table where he was mending Ash's bridle. Maybe he stopped for gas. But an hour later, headlights appeared far off, too many, moving too fast. The boy stepped outside, heart thudding. A ranch hand's truck skidded into the yard, kicking up mud. "There's been an accident," the man said. "Mr. Barrett's truck went off the South Ridge. They've called the sheriff." Clara covered her mouth. Noah froze, the world tilting under him. They rode in silence to the ridge. The night had come quickly, swallowing the valley in blue-gray light. At the edge of the slope, the truck's taillights flickered weakly through the trees. The sheriff's car was parked nearby, its red beacon washing over the snow. Eli sat on a blanket beside the wreck, wrapped in a coat too big for him. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. "Don't look like that," he said when he saw them. "It's only a truck." The sheriff spoke quietly with Clara, assuring her that the crash hadn't been fatal, just bad luck on black ice. "He's lucky," the man said. "Another 20 feet and he'd have gone into the ravine." Noah crouched beside Eli. "You okay?" The man nodded. "A little shaken, but I'll survive." He looked toward the valley below, the lights of his ranch flickering faintly. You ever notice how life doesn't wait to humble you? One minute you think you own the world, the next you're sitting in the dirt watching your engine smoke. Noah tried to smile. "Guess it's good you signed that land over before the crash." Eli laughed hoarsely. "Guess so." Then his gaze softened. "You know, I spent years chasing stability, financial security, property, the next project. I thought that was strength. But it's just another kind of fear, isn't it?" "Maybe," Noah said. "But fear can still build something good, if you don't let it drive." The man chuckled, coughing once. "You talk like a preacher." "Maybe I just listen better than most." When they returned to the ranch, the stars had come out, cold and bright. Eli refused to go to the hospital, insisting he just needed rest. Clara helped him into the house, while Noah stood outside watching Ash pacing near the gate. The horse stopped, head tilted toward the cabin light, nostrils flaring. He made a soft sound, half whinny, half sigh, and Noah understood without, knowing how. The wind that once carried restlessness now carried warning. At dawn, the wind picked up again. Eli came out, leaning on the porch rail. His arm was in a sling. "You know what I thought about last night?" he said. "What?" "That crash. It felt like a message. Maybe I've been holding too tight to everything. Maybe the world's telling me it's time to let go." He looked toward the horse. "You think animals understand that kind of thing?" "I think they live it," Noah said. Eli nodded. "Then maybe I should start taking notes." He glanced at the papers still tucked in the boy's coat pocket. "Keep those safe. They mean something now." As the sun rose higher, the snow around them began to melt faster, turning into small rivers that traced paths through the dirt. The valley filled with the low murmur of water and wind, and the sound of things finally loosening their grip. Ash stepped closer to the open gate again. The wind no longer whispered. It hummed. A sound of movement, of leaving or returning. No one could tell which. Noah reached out, brushing the horse's mane from his eyes. "Go on," he whispered, "if you need to." Ash took a single step forward, then stopped. The breeze caught his mane, lifting it like smoke. Behind them, Eli's voice broke the silence, soft but sure. "Maybe freedom isn't leaving," he said. "Maybe it's staying without being forced." And for the first time since the crash, the wind changed direction. Not harsh, not cold, just enough to carry their breath into the wide, forgiving air. A week passed before the color came back to the sky. The ridge snow had melted into long veins of water that ran toward the creek, and the first wildflowers began to poke through the damp soil. Spring came quietly to the Barrett Ranch, as if afraid to startle what had been broken and mended here. Eli moved slower now, the arm in his sling a constant reminder of what the ice had taught him. But there was a lightness to his step that hadn't been there before. He spent mornings walking the fence lines, greeting the workers by name, something he'd never done in years of owning the place. At the cabin, Noah helped his mother plant vegetables in the small patch of ground behind the porch. The soil was dark and rich, the same color as the stallion's coat. Every time the wind stirred, Noah looked toward the pasture, half expecting to see Ash standing by the open gate. but the horse had wandered farther lately, staying away for hours before returning at dusk. That morning, Eli came down with a clipboard tucked under his good arm. "I have a proposition," he said, leaning against the fence. "The ranch needs a caretaker for the south pasture. Someone who understands animals better than accountants. You up for the job?" Noah glanced at his mother, who smiled. "You're asking me?" the boy said. "I don't see anyone else who passed an audition like that," Eli said, nodding toward the corral. Noah hesitated. "I don't know if I can manage all that." "You already did," Eli replied. "You just didn't notice." He handed over a small envelope. Inside was a simple document. Handwritten, not printed. "It's not a contract," Eli explained. "Just a promise. One man to another." Noah unfolded it carefully. At the top, in Eli's uneven handwriting, were the words, "If you listen long enough, everything tells you what it needs." The boy read it twice, then folded it back. "I'll take the job," he said softly. Later that afternoon, the three of them rode out to the far field, Eli in the old pickup, Clara and Noah in the back. Ash followed alongside, his black coat gleaming under the sun. The breeze carried the smell of cedar and wet grass. When they reached the southern gate, Eli stopped the truck and got out. "This is where I almost sold half the ranch last year," he said. "Developers wanted to build luxury lodges, a new tourism opportunity, they called it. Said I'd make more in one season than in 5 years of cattle work." "What stopped you?" Clara asked. He smiled faintly. "A boy and his horse, apparently." They laughed softly, but Eli's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Truth is, I thought owning more made me untouchable. Now I see the best things don't belong to me anyway. This land, it's just borrowed time." As the afternoon stretched on, Noah led Ash through the open gate into the southern pasture. The stallion tossed his head, sensing something different about the air. Freer, lighter. Noah unhooked the rope from his halter and stepped back. "You can go as far as you want," he said. Ash stood still for a moment, then began to walk. The movement turned into a trot, then a run. His hooves thundered across the earth, flinging clumps of grass behind him. The wind caught his mane, turning it into a streak of ink against the sky. Eli and Clara watched, neither speaking. "He's not running away," Eli said finally. "He's remembering how." Noah's throat tightened. "Maybe we all are." By evening, the sky flared orange and lavender. Ash returned slowly, stopping by the boy's side. Noah reached up and rested his forehead against the stallion's muzzle, breathing in the familiar warmth. "You came back again," he whispered. "Guess you're not done teaching me." Eli turned toward the truck. "We should head back before dark." As they drove, Noah kept glancing at the horizon where Ash grazed alone, a black shape against the fading light. The boy felt an ache that was both joy and loss, as if every step forward meant leaving something precious behind. That night, the cabin filled with the smell of soup and the sound of Clara humming softly as she cooked. Eli stopped by with a folder of new maps for the ranch. "I redrew the boundary lines," he said. "You two should know where your land begins." Noah looked at. The maps spread across the table. The lines weren't straight anymore. They curved gently around the stream, following the natural bend of the earth. "You drew it like the land actually looks," the boy said. Eli smiled. "For once, I didn't argue with reality." They ate dinner together, a quiet meal marked by the clinking of spoons and the hiss of wind outside. Before leaving, Eli said, "Tomorrow, I'll be heading into Billings for a checkup. If the weather holds, I'll be back by evening. Keep an eye on the place while I'm gone." Noah nodded. "We will." After he left, Clara gathered the dishes while Noah stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the fields. Ash stood in the distance, head bowed, almost invisible except for the glint of his eyes. The wind was softer now, more like breathing than movement. For the first time, Noah realized that the ranch no longer felt haunted by wealth or loss. It felt lived in, earned, not bought. The silence here wasn't heavy anymore. It was whole. He sat on the porch steps until the cold reached his fingers. Behind him, Clara called, "Bedtime, honey?" "In a minute," he said. He watched as a small breeze moved through the grass, bending it just enough to create a path between him and the horse. It wasn't much, just a shimmer of motion, but it felt like a sign. Tomorrow was coming, and for once, it didn't scare him. When he finally went inside, the sound of the door closing behind him felt different. Less like separation. More like belonging. Out in the pasture, Ash lifted his head to the stars, then turned toward the hills as if listening for something far beyond human hearing. The air shimmered faintly, carrying a warmth that didn't come from the earth. The world had changed shape, not through force or miracle, but through the quiet courage of those who had learned to stay. And somewhere between the house and the field, the open gate creaked once in the wind, just enough to remind them all that freedom was still waiting whenever they were ready to walk through. The day Eli Barrett drove into Billings, the weather had turned silver gray, the kind that makes the mountains look like ghosts. Noah stood on the porch with his mother, waving as the truck disappeared down the long dirt road. The wind picked up for a moment, then died just as suddenly, as if exhaling after a long breath. The ranch was quiet again, but it wasn't the heavy quiet from before. It was the calm that follows trust. Inside, Clara busied herself with chores while Noah walked to the pasture. Ash was waiting by the gate, head low, tail flicking lazily. "He'll be back soon," the boy said, resting his hand on the horse's neck. "You'll see." The stallion's ear twitched, but his eyes stayed on the horizon. By afternoon, rain rolled over the ridge, slow and steady. It wasn't a storm, more like a memory washing the dust off the valley. The roof of the cabin sang softly under the drops. Noah stayed outside until his mother called him in. They ate dinner by lamplight. Soup, bread, the quiet sound of spoons against bowls. Hours later, the phone rang. Clara picked it up, her voice low, then still. Noah watched her face shift from surprise to relief. "He's fine," she said finally, turning toward him. "Roads closed because of flooding, so he's staying the night in town." The boy nodded, smiling faintly. "Guess even the rich can't argue with nature." Clara laughed softly, setting the phone down. "Go on to bed, Noah. Tomorrow will come fast." But Noah didn't sleep. Long after the lantern was out, he lay awake, listening to the rain. There was something about it that felt like waiting, like the world holding its breath for one last thing to happen. He slipped from bed, wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, and stepped outside. The night was drenched in sound, frogs near the creek, water running off the eaves, and the soft, rhythmic stomping of Ash in his stall. Noah walked toward the barn, the mud cold beneath his feet, When he opened the door, the horse lifted his head immediately. "Couldn't sleep either?" the boy whispered. Ash gave a quiet rumble, something between a sigh and a hum. Noah leaned against the doorframe, listening to the storm fade to drizzle. "You know," he said, "when I first saw you, I thought you were the loneliest thing I'd ever seen. But maybe you were just waiting for the right kind of quiet." The horse stepped closer, pressing his forehead gently to the boy's chest. Noah smiled, brushing the wet strands of mane from his face. "When Eli comes back, maybe we can all go riding. Not for show, just for the feel of the wind again." The next morning broke clear and bright. The valley looked scrubbed clean, the fields gleaming with dew. Clara was already outside hanging laundry when a sound drifted from the distance, an engine on the road. Noah looked up, shading his eyes. A blue pickup rolled toward them, slower than usual. When it stopped near the fence, Eli climbed out, his arm still bandaged, but his expression light. "Morning," he said. "I brought breakfast from town. Real coffee, not the stuff I burn here." Clara smiled, taking the paper bag from him. "You made it through the flood, then?" "Barely," he said, glancing toward Noah. "But the ranch looks better than ever. You've done good work." The boy grinned. "Ash helped?" "I figured," Eli said, walking toward the barn. He stopped near the gate, watching the stallion graze in the sunlight. "You know, I used to think the wind was what made this place alive," he said. "Now I think it's the people who finally stopped fighting it." Noah tilted his head. "The wind's quiet today." Eli nodded. "Maybe it's listening." They spent the morning fixing a fence post by the creek. Clara brought them lemonade and sat nearby, humming a tune so soft it blended with the water. When the work was done, Eli leaned on the shovel, looking around the valley, the cabin, the corral, the endless stretch of grass that shimmered under the sun. "I used to believe success was about getting further," he said. "Now I just want to stand still long enough to feel what I missed." "You're doing that now," Clara said gently. He looked at her, and for the first time, the corners of his eyes softened into something like peace. By late afternoon, the heat grew thick, the kind that makes the air ripple. Ash stood by the open gate again, tail swishing. Noah approached, running his hand down the stallion's side. "You can go if you want," he said. "You always can." The horse didn't move. Instead, he lowered his head, brushing his muzzle against the boy's arm. Noah laughed quietly. "Guess we both like it here." Behind them, Eli called out, "You two staying for dinner?" "Wouldn't miss it," Noah replied. The evening passed slow and golden. They ate outside, plates balanced on their knees, the smell of grass and wood smoke around them. Conversation drifted between them easily. Memories, jokes, the kind of talk that fills the silence without breaking it. When the last light faded, Eli stood and stretched. "Funny," he said. "For a man who once had everything, I've never felt richer than right now." Clara smiled. "Then you finally caught up to yourself?" The man laughed softly, shaking his head. "No, I just stopped running." They lingered a while longer before heading in. Noah was the last to go. He stood by the fence, looking at Ash standing motionless in the moonlight. The wind had completely stopped. Even the trees were still. The night felt infinite. He reached out one last time, running his hand along the horse's neck. "We made it," he whispered. "All of us." Ash shifted slightly, ears twitching. Then he took a slow step closer, resting his head against the boy's shoulder. The world around them exhaled, and in that single breath, everything that had been broken found its place again. The wind didn't whisper anymore, because it didn't need to. The land remembered for it. When Noah finally turned toward the cabin, he looked back once more. The gate stood open, the moonlight pouring through like a quiet promise. Freedom had stopped being something to chase. It had become a way of being still. And for the first time in a long time, every living thing on the Barrett Ranch, man, horse, and earth, breathed in rhythm with the same gentle truth. Nothing that's truly loved ever really leaves. If this story touched something in you, tell me what part stayed with you the most. I'd love to read your thoughts below. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this one, real, quiet, and full of heart, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.